particularly in perimenopause, it's so difficult to gain any lean muscle mass. So the idea of actually bulking up, it's like you'd be really lucky. I'd be really jealous of you if you could actually bulk up a bit. It's hard work. So I think anxiety is a feature of perimenopause, very definitely. There are real changes to our mental health, and anxiety is a very frequently cited symptom of perimenopause. And as we know, if you're having caffeine to excess, then it can really sort of drive those feelings of anxiety.
Welcome to the Fit Dads podcast. I'm Brad Thompson, and that fine-looking man sat across from me is Mr. Ryan Dutton. Today we're joined by another guest who's sharing a message that will affect every mum, every sister, every auntie, and every grandmother on the planet. Dr. Anna Lowe is a leading voice in women's health who's on a mission to change the conversation around menopause and how it impacts women in a multitude of ways. We'll explore Dr. Anna's massive brain and discuss what women really experience in later life, and how training, nutrition and lifestyle need to be adapted as a result. This is Dr. Anna's space to share her expertise and help you, the listener or the viewer, depending on what you're consuming this on, understand what's really going on. So welcome to the show, Dr. Anna Lowe.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Anna, thank you for coming on. We did a episode recently, a Q&A episode, and we asked our audience to just throw out some questions. And we had quite a few around menopause, perimenopause. And I told you before we start, we did our best to answer those questions based on the limited knowledge we have. But we thought, because it got such a good response, let's get someone in who really knows what they're talking about. So we're hoping you're going to fill in some of the gaps today.
Let's hope so, yeah.
We've got a series of questions each, haven't we? We're hoping there's no overlaps. We haven't conferred just yet. But have you got anything to kick us off for an hour?
I suppose straight from Dr. Anna's mouth, if that's all right. If you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what sort of brought you to this point.
Well, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me. So I'm a physiotherapist by background. I spent a number of years working in the NHS and in private practice. My area of practice and interest was musculoskeletal health. So spent a long time working directly with patients to promote good musculoskeletal health. After that, I started teaching on physiotherapy courses. I worked at Sheffield Hallam University for a long time teaching, did my master's and my PhD, and the focus of my PhD was looking at the physiotherapy workforce and how we can support physios and other healthcare professionals to have better conversations with their patients about physical activity and exercise. And I guess really early on, I became very interested in prevention. I've always been interested in that space between physiotherapy and the fitness industry. It's a bit of a grey area, and I think there's so much potential there. So after my sort of teaching phase, I had a bit of time out and then went back into an academic role at the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre, which is part of Sheffield Hallam University. And that role had two sort of parts to it. One was very practical and applied, and part of my job was to support the citywide endeavour in Sheffield to make the population of Sheffield more active and to help everybody get the benefits of physical activity, particularly looking at those groups of people who really face barriers to becoming more physically active. And then the other part of my role was academic. And through that part of my role, I led some big research studies looking at women in midlife and their perceptions of strength training. And I became really interested, again, in that sort of preventative role of strength training and how we might strip away the perceptions of strength training for women and really sort of reframe it as a public health intervention. We know that women in midlife are an at-risk population for poor muscle strength and poor bone health in later life, and it's to a large extent modifiable. So it feels like there's a massive open goal there that we're missing because the solution of strength training isn't framed right for the population. So that's my sort of background. I now have a bit of I think people might call it a portfolio career. It's I think that's a nice way of sort of describing what feels like organised chaos, but I do a few different things. So I run a company called Midlife Fitness Coaching, and we support women in midlife to optimise their approach to exercise and nutrition. It's very much about trying to support women to make sustainable changes to their behaviour, and to just get the basics right, just to focus on the basics and get that really embedded into their lives. So I'm sure I'll talk more about that later. I also I still have an honorary role at the university, so I have a few PhD students there, and like to keep that connection with the university. And then I do bits of teaching and consultancy as well on women's health and physical activity and exercise.
Feel very, very lucky to be sat across from you today. Absolutely. You mentioned about some barriers, some challenges, especially when it comes to getting the population of Sheffield in particular fit, healthy and active. Any common barriers that you've come across?
Yeah, there's loads. I think if we're talking about sort of general movement and activity rather than sort of specific interventions, then if we look at the way our lives are constructed, you could almost think that it's constructed to keep us very sedentary. And, it's much easier in this day and age to live a very sedentary life than it is to live a very active life. So we have to sort of think about ways that we can support people to re-engineer activity back into their lives. So things like, getting sports provision better in schools and supporting schools to do that well. Things like encouraging people to get out of their cars wherever possible, use public transport, use active travel, so walking and cycling to work, those kind of things. Promoting parks and green spaces. It's so broad, the ways that we can support people to live active lives. I suppose in terms of barriers, there's many barriers. I think people feel very time pressured. I think lots of people have aches and pains. Lots of people worry that moving more will make things hurt more. From a physio perspective, that's something that I've heard an awful lot of over the years. So there's some really common barriers that we know about. But the way our lives are constructed, we do have to be really intentional about getting physical activity back in.
If you had to give one thing that someone going through perimenopause or menopause could change about their lifestyle, what would that one thing be? Would it be exercise? That's one thing you mentioned heavily. Or would it be something nutrition-based, supplement-based? What is the one thing, if anyone going through this right now can make a change on it, what would they make?
Yeah, so I suppose what I've just spoken about then is very, very broad, and that's sort of more in relation to the work that I did previously that was like looking at the whole population of Sheffield. I think the stuff that I do now is so much more focused on women in midlife. And obviously I bring my own biases to this, so I want everyone to be active, whereas your nutritionist will want everyone to optimise their nutrition. And then, your more medical people might want people to optimise medical interventions. But I suppose in terms of the clients that we see, if somebody's going from being really very sedentary to starting to become more active, I often feel that the single most impactful thing they could do is have a really good walking habit and just get out and get some steps in every day. There's absolutely bomb-proof evidence that supports long-term health in many, many ways. And that includes our mental health, our metabolic health, our musculoskeletal health. It's not it won't do everything, but if they can only do one thing, if they can only reasonably focus on one change, then it feels like a pretty good place to start.
Low barrier to entry, it's easy to do.
Yeah.
You don't need any kind of membership anywhere, you just put your trainers on and go for a walk.
Exactly. And it can be as little as 10 minutes. I think we often slip into that trap of feeling like, well, I've only got 10 minutes now, it's not worth doing anything. But one of the messages that we try and get across to women all the time is that doing something is always better than doing nothing. So just those little exercise snacks through the day, changes so much of your physiology, and it gives you a real mental health boost as well.
Yeah, I really preach the same thing, because I say even if it is 10 minutes, that 10 minutes may not do massive amounts on that day, but it's actually a habit that you're forming, and you're getting into this habit now of doing something every day. Even if that thing I say is like 2 minutes, if you can literally spare 2 minutes to walk around the block and come back in, perfect. You've just put a penny in the bank of that day of saying, right, this is another day where I'm going to move, and it becomes more of a priority over time. For sure.
From when we first spoke, Anna, on a video call, and you mentioned 2 words to me, and it's really stuck with me. I don't think I've really stressed the importance of that initial chat with me, which was a health intervention. And I went home and I told my wife, I'm like, I've just spoken to this amazing lady. And she mentioned that she strongly believes that strength training, resistance training should be a health intervention for, women in midlife or women who are, going through certain changes. Was there a tipping point that you noticed from whether people you work with or surroundings that you saw? Was there a tipping point for you that thought this needs some attention?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, well, I think when we think about exercise as a public health intervention, so we're not sort of thinking about optimizing to the nth degree in a sort of performance setting. If we think about it as the health of the population, then I think historically sort of aerobic fitness has taken priority over sort of strength training, and obviously there's many different facets to fitness, but often it's sort of aerobic versus strength, isn't it? That it often comes down to that sort of it's very reductive, but it comes down to that. And I think in terms of public health benefit, the focus has always been on the aerobic training and aerobic fitness. And I can see why, because I think the evidence was a little bit more mature around that. And also the messaging that we give to people around aerobic fitness is what we've just been saying. It's just move more, just get out, just make the most of those little opportunities. Anything's better than nothing. So it's really quite simple in terms of messaging, and it's quite relatively simple for people to act upon as well. Whereas the strength training, I think, is more complex, and there's all those questions of, where do I start? Which muscles, which body parts, how hard, how many sets, how many reps, how long do I rest for? There's a perception and it's a well-founded perception that strength training is complicated, and I think that's a massive barrier for people. So I suppose the research work that we did at the university helped us to understand that perception of complexity as a real barrier. And so I guess our mission has been, well, what can we do about that? How can we really make it feel as accessible and achievable as possible?
I suppose from an understanding, from a strength-based perspective, it's almost quite immersive, isn't it? Like, if to be really good at it, you've almost got to feel like you give yourself up to it a little bit and be willing to learn. And I imagine that's quite difficult, especially if someone's picking it up in later life. Like,
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I feel like it just ain't going to happen. It's just, it's too big an ask. So then it's like, well, okay, if we're simplifying the messages around movement to exercise, snacking, and just get out of the house, then how can we do the same for strength training? How can we make it feel achievable, and how can we get that message across that anything's better than nothing? And we've had conversations in the past about if you look at the success of parkrun in terms of getting really diverse sectors of the population together regularly exercising, what would the strength training version of that look like? How can we make it like something that people want to do, something that people feel able to do,
and community based, where they feel like they're part of a team who's doing it. Yeah, it's a great analogy and idea and link that you make in there. Have you made any headway on that? Has there been any conversations with key people in the community?
Well, I don't. So I suppose that where I feel like there has been progress is that I think the evidence is catching up, and in terms of that sort of message about simplifying the key principles, I think that it's becoming more apparent through the evidence that's getting synthesised that actually doing something is always better than nothing. And if you're going from not doing any strength training, then literally doing anything will give you some benefit. And all those things about, like 20 minutes 3 times a week, that sort of minimum dose approach. It's like, how low can we go dose wise and it still be effective? And I think what the evidence is showing us that if people are untrained and inactive, then that dose can be really, really low and still have an important physiological impact. And also it can then sort of unlock they're onto the first step then, aren't they? And if they can do that and feel good about it, then where can they progress from that?
There's probably 2 main barriers that I see with people when it comes to strength training. This isn't just people, going through perimenopause or menopause. It's everyone. And the first one is the association with strength training being like for big, burly blokes. I mean, that's what women especially, are worried that they're going to get too big and bulky. And if we had a pound for every time we'd heard that. And the second thing is aerobic fitness makes you sweat. It gets you out of breath. You leave that session feeling like, wow, that was tough. I'm red in the face. I'm dripping with sweat.
Yeah.
You're not going to leave a strength session specifically feeling like that, potentially.
Yeah.
Some people might, but a lot of people won't. And there's this association with it not being as effective because I'm not as out of breath and I'm not sweating as much. And you're probably not burning as many calories in that session, but what it's doing metabolically inside for you and your hormones is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And on, on both of those points, I hear that fear, particularly in a sort of slightly older age group, about bulking up. I hear that a lot. I think, I'm almost 50, and I think women sort of my age and older were brought up on that sort of cardio. That it's the only way, and you have to sort of restrict your intake and increase your energy output, and that's the only way. So when you start introducing strength training as an idea, it can be really fear-inducing, and people do their only sort of mental image is of some buff bloke in a gym, and that's it. Yeah. So it does make me really, really happy to see younger age groups, like women in their 20s now, and they're not. It's not all about being skinny, it's about being strong, and they appear to be so much more comfortable with their bodies. And so I feel like there is progress. But in that midlife age group, there is definitely a fear about bulking up. Yeah. And we do a lot to, to debunk that myth, because particularly in perimenopause, it's so difficult to gain any lean muscle mass. So the idea of actually bulking up it's like, you'd be really lucky. I'd be really jealous of you if you could actually bulk up a bit. It's hard work. So it is an unfounded myth for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
You touched on a word there, Anna, which was perimenopause. It's one word, isn't it?
Perimenopause, yeah.
Perimenopause, or as my client Alice calls it, spicy menopause. So for, I suppose, the audience's perspective as well, would you talk us through exactly what consists of that, or what makes it different to other progressions in, as women age? What's the situation there?
Yeah, for sure. So menopause is a big hormonal change in the life of women. We have three big hormonal changes. We have puberty, pregnancy, and perimenopause, so the 3 Ps, and they're all hugely impactful in terms of the hormonal changes that women undergo, and the impact that has on their health and their energy levels, and their the way that they interact with the world. So they're all really, really important. Menopause as a word actually means the point at which you haven't had a period for 12 months. So that's the point at which you go through menopause, and everything thereafter is postmenopause. Perimenopause just means the time sort of around menopause, time leading up to that one point in time. And I think one thing that we've learned and that's become much more widely known is that perimenopausal phase can last several years. So you might have several years of sort of woolly symptoms, and then your periods might stop, and then after 12 months you would go through that sort of menopause point, and then you'd be postmenopausal. So in terms of the sort of time frames, women tend to be in perimenopause for a long time. I think it's really, really important that we stress that there is no standard menopause or perimenopause experience. Women have vastly different experiences of it, and some people really do experience very little that's problematic. They really do sort of sail through it, and that's one end of the spectrum. Some people have a really, really difficult time, and then most women are somewhere in between. That sort of perimenopausal phase. So the average age that women go through that point of menopause is 51. And so if we think that women could have several years of perimenopausal changes in the lead up to that, then you could be quite early in your 40s and starting to feel out of sorts. Your periods might get a bit more erratic. You might experience brain fog, changes in fatigue, changes in your ability to recover after exercise. And it can feel very, very woolly. And it's very, very difficult. It's like knitting fog because it changes over time. So our hormones don't decline steadily. There'll be lots of peaks and troughs. So, we talk to women and they will say, I've had this like constellation of symptoms and it got really bad and I was going to see my GP and then the next week I felt fine again. And so it's something that can be kicked down the road for many months and sometimes years. So that's perimenopause, menopause and postmenopause in a nutshell.
Okay.
Did you say knitting fog there? I've never heard that phrase before, but it seems to
it's a good one, isn't it?
Hesitate. Yeah, it resonates that. At the risk of sounding like a 5-year-old, like why does it happen?
It's just part of female aging. So it sort of signals the end of our fertile window. So the ceasing of periods means that you can't then get pregnant, and it's the end of that sort of season of life, I guess. So it's part of female physiology.
This is just a bit of a nerdy question for me. Do other mammals go through this as well?
Oh,
I'm really curious.
So I feel like I'm well out of my area of expertise now. So
zoologist.
But I did once hear a podcast about the fact that some species of whales have menopause. Do you know this? No. So they I'm outside of my comfort zone here, but I think most other mammals will be fertile and then quite soon after they stop being fertile, they will expire. So they don't tend to sort of live long after that fertile window. I think that some species of whales do have a menopause and then have quite a long life afterwards, and that's quite interesting. And I think from an evolutionary perspective, they were talking about the way that those sort of postmenopausal whales kind of support the health of the pod in terms of the fact they can catch more food than they actually need, and they can support their children and their grandchildren, grand whales, whatever they are. But it's just interesting. It's different because most other species will, when they stop becoming fertile, they stop being useful. But thankfully, humans and whales and possibly others still have can really contribute in that post-fertile period.
It's fascinating.
I feel like I've had to read the room there. My brain were thinking like, don't say a joke, whatever you can about like menopausal whales, just ignore it. Read the room.
Yeah, it did cross my mind.
Yeah, honestly.
Well, we've had some questions from our audience as well, and one thing that keeps coming up with some of the women that I coach who are going through menopause and perimenopause is supplements and things they can take, and they're constantly saying how supplement companies are quite, what's the right word, manipulative in what they do. When they find, when social media companies know your age and they know what you're searching, and there's all these links being made through the algorithm, that you can start getting certain advertisements that are quite pushy and quite, they throw campaigns that make you feel like, oh my God, that is me. I'm this person. The person they're describing is me. I definitely need this supplement they're selling. Is there any truth to that in terms of perimenopausal or menopausal women need to take certain supplements or things they can push to kind of boost, whether it's energy levels, cognition, just recovery? Is there anything specific that they can take, or is it all just hocus pocus from the supplement companies?
So, my personal view on this is that we don't need supplements. There are a number of caveats to that. So we have this conversation with a lot of the women that we coach. What we would recommend is a multivit, and then through the winter we'd recommend that you take vitamin D if there isn't enough in your multivit. Beyond that, we don't recommend anything. The vitamin D recommendation is NHS guidance, so that's absolutely gold standard. So beyond that, there isn't bomb-proof evidence that we need anything. That's not to say that we won't benefit from it, but the evidence isn't strong enough for me as a coach to recommend it to people. We spend a lot of time, people will be saying, what about turmeric? What about this? What about Q10 enzymes? What about this? And we'll be like, no, save your money, buy another kettlebell. There just isn't the evidence. And that's absolutely not to say that people won't get benefit from it for whatever reason. It might be placebo, it might be genuine. Yeah. But it's just that the evidence isn't strong enough for us to recommend that people go out and buy it. I think what you were talking about, Ryan, is what we call Meno-washing. I don't know if you've come across that term. It's a bit, yeah. So it's that sort of manipulative, slightly mercenary approach. Yeah, absolutely. That we need certain products when we're in menopause, and that they're different to other products. So you will find menopause specific body washes. Apparently you can buy menopause specific pajamas. They're all at a slightly inflated price point, as you'd expect. And it's just preying on people who have genuine concerns, genuine fears about their own health, and want to do the right thing and the best thing. And somebody's making money from that. So we try in our coaching, we try and strip it back to basics, and their nutritional intake is really, really important. So we always have conversations about the quality of the food they're having, the volume of food they're having, whether they're fueling well, and how we can improve that. There are times when if people are vegan, for example, then if they have a diet that's restrictive of some food groups, then we might say consider a supplement, but in general it's a food first when you can approach. I think the exception to that is probably protein, just because it's really hard to get enough protein in your diet. We know that women are at risk of poor muscle health and poor bone health. And we know that if women can build a bit of lean muscle mass, then that will really support good musculoskeletal health going forwards. So protein has the benefit of helping you feel fuller for longer, and also supporting the development of lean muscle mass. So we do talk to most of our clients about protein and how they can get it through whole foods, but also when supplementation is helpful.
Yeah. So if you're going to change one thing in the nutrition supplement world, it would just be have more protein, essentially.
Yeah. Have more protein in your food that you eat. Try and prioritise that. This is obviously only it's only up to a point. I think most of our women end up doing food diaries, and so we get to see what their intake looks like. Some of them will track their macros as well, so we get quite a detailed insight into what their intake looks like. And if they're hitting their protein targets, then that's absolutely great. But what we do see consistently, I think just as a consequence of our Western diet, is that protein tends to be very low. There's been lots of interesting research about how much protein we need, and how much protein active women need, and how much protein active women in midlife need. And the evidence seems to suggest that around 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight is about right. It's just a bit awkward for the sums. It's a hard one to do quickly. For sure. So that's a conversation we will have with most women.
Yeah, brilliant. Again, another food one is around ultra processed foods. It's a bit of a hot topic in the whole fitness nutrition world at the moment, because there's a lot of fear mongering around it as well. I think some of it's founded, some of it's not. Does ultra processed food make menopause and perimenopause worse? Is there any studies that suggest that if you have a higher ultra processed diet, that you are going to get symptoms that are worse than others? Would you encourage people to cut it out, not be too bothered, have a nice balance? What's your general rule around UPFs?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a really interesting area. I think we're learning a lot about it. The answer to are there any studies that suggest it might make menopausal symptoms worse? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Okay. I do know there are studies that suggest that if people are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, so have lower income, less money to spend on food, possibly, then they tend to experience worse menopausal symptoms. But that won't just be food driven. That will be from a whole range of factors related to to poverty. Yeah. But I don't know about UPF. My guess is that if people have, highly processed diets, their experience of menopause will be worse. My guess is that it will be that, because it's a very inflammatory diet. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I think the whole UPF thing is difficult. I think it's really complex. I am absolutely in favour of people eating whole foods as far as possible. But equally, we don't all have time and resource to prepare things from scratch all the time. I think it can become a very sort of middle class conversation as well. Buying whole foods and buying fresh food is expensive, and it takes time. And if someone's working 3 jobs and they don't have any sort of disposable income at the end of the week, then things have to change, don't they? They've got to feed the kids, and so I feel like it's. Eating whole foods is really, really important, but it's just important to do the best you can with what you've got, and that looks a bit different for everybody. And I do think the UPF conversation it can be a bit judgmental of other people's choices.
Yeah, I agree. I've got a WhatsApp community of all my clients in there, and I read a book recently called Ultra Processed People, and I just found it fascinating. I thought it really highlighted for me the current studies on ultra processed foods, and we had a really big debate, quite a heated debate. It's a really lovely community of clients I've got in this group, but it was the first time I'd ever seen conflict in the group of people being like, actually, this isn't my thoughts, and I think you're wrong for thinking that. And there was the money situation, there was the whole socio-economic thing, and it was like, when you look at the way someone eats, it's quite a personal thing as well, isn't it? It's very personal to each of us, and when someone attacks that, you feel quite offended, which I totally get. But I do think there's simple swaps that everyone can make, but unfortunately the simple swaps are the more expensive ones. Because when I read this book, I basically went through everything in my diet. So I was having these like little rice cakes with like yogurt on top. I was like, it's rice cakes with yogurt, how bad can that be, right? And then I look on the back, it's full of crap, emulsifiers, artificial flavourings, colourings, sweetness. And then literally above it, on the shelf above, was some other, like, really kind of bit more expensive, but just 3 ingredient rice cakes. No yogurt on top. And I thought, I'm just going to get some jam and put it on. So I went to the jam section, got my usual jam, had a look on the back. Full of crap, right? There's that one above it. It's about £1 more expensive. That one's only got like 4 ingredients. Great, I'll get that one. So I'm already spending more money, but But what I did find was this. A fascinating thing was this. So I've always described myself as a bit of a gannet. I could just keep eating and eating and eating, and I've always kind of gone for like the low calorie versions, low calorie mayo, low calorie this, fat free yogurts. And as soon as I started making that switch to like the 3 ingredient stuff and the more whole food, less ultra processed, that hunger's not there like it used to be, which is my most fascinating take from this. And it's everyone's experience of this is going to be different. But I think for me, it's really solved that issue of like, underlying levels of hunger. I like to think I'm recovering more. I like to think I've got more energy as well. But I think if you're going through something like perimenopause, I think making some really simple, small swaps, if you can afford to, and you have the ability to do that, probably could go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it is. That's really, your experience of that is really interesting, and I think we can probably all find some small changes that we can make. It's just the changes will be different for everybody. I think there are times when, having ingredients or having stuff in a loaf of bread that will make the shelf life a bit longer, that might be the difference between some kids getting toast with their beans that night or not. And so those sort of I think those sort of things really matter. Some cereals and other food groups are fortified with important things that improves health at a population level. So I think that's another consideration. And I also, I try and eat well, and I try and feed my kids well. But then it's interesting to me, I do a lot of cycling. So then there's the whole sort of energy drink, energy bar, and it's like, well, you can't get those in an unprocessed way, can you? So it's really complicated, and I think it's a really good one to reflect on, and I think we can all reflect on our own eating habits and try and make some changes. As coaches, we can support people with that, but it's just the changes your clients make might be different from the changes you make, and it's just really important not to sort of judge those changes.
There's certain things you can't get around and don't want to get around as well. This podcast, we usually do this podcast a little bit earlier in the day, And if we were doing it at 11 o'clock, this wouldn't be a glass of water, it'd be a can of Monster. I am a daily Monster consumer. And there's certain things, so even though I've been on this kind of like thing in my diet, like taking out this and changing that, there's certain things I'm not willing to change.
The Monster's staying.
The Monster's staying, oh yeah, 100%, that's going nowhere. But I don't drink tea or coffee.
Yeah.
I need an energy source. It's either that or like Red Bull or something, which I do sometimes have as well. But I need energy on certain days. And same thing with the running and the energy gels and the sweets, and just some days feeling like I just need some calories, some energy. I was on a run the other day and I felt so, like, you know when you're so drained that you feel like you're going to faint a little bit, like you feel light in your hands. I just nip into a shop and I bought like 3 Snickers bars. And I just got them all down. There was no sense of like, where's a pear? I want a pear. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like in that moment, I just need something to give me calories. And it's tricky when you are entering into the endurance side of things and fueling for that. But swinging it back onto menopause, I guess, obviously we've covered supplements, we've covered UPFs. Is there anything else you wanted to cover? Questions wise,
probably speaking about again some non-negotiables. I've put down alcohol and caffeine, seeing as Ryan's just mentioned Monster as well. Are there any particular adverse effects as maybe the hormonal profile changes or anything like that? Is there any downsides to really over consuming alcohol that that makes the subgroup of women in later life any different to everyday population?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one actually, and I suppose I'm reflecting on my experience with clients here rather than a solid knowledge of the evidence base. But we hear a lot that women feel that they just can't metabolize alcohol in the same way. So people will often think back to how they would cope with drinking to excess and enjoying it and then having a bit of headache the next morning, but being able to function. And then you get into your 50s and if you dare to have a second glass of wine, you really pay for it the next day. I couldn't honestly say whether that's a consequence of aging or whether it's whether it's particularly hormonally driven, but it's something that we hear a lot. Caffeine's a really interesting one, and again, this is reflecting on my experience with clients, but I think anxiety is a feature of perimenopause, very definitely. There are real changes to our mental health, and anxiety is a very frequently cited symptom of perimenopause, and as we know, if you're having caffeine to excess, or then it can really sort of drive that those feelings of anxiety. So that would be a conversation to have if people were experiencing that.
Really chuffed that you've mentioned anxiety. I've got a client in particular who her daughters have got horses. And for years she's driven big articulates with the horses on the back, and then she began going through perimenopause, a terrifying fear of driving this articulate for no reason. It just seems to come out of nowhere, and she's driven all over Europe. She's very, very proficient in what she does, but just could not bring herself to do it. Have you come across things like that from an anecdotal perspective, I'm guessing, in your own coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our ability to manage the stresses and strains of everyday life changes, and that sort of set against the fact that midlife is a very stressful experience for many women. We talk about the midlife squeeze or the midlife sandwich. I don't know if you've heard of those, but it's that idea of if children are getting older and their needs are changing. I think because as a population we've tended to have children later than our predecessors. So you can have a perimenopausal woman who's still got kids at primary school. That's not uncommon at all. So your kids still really need you. Their needs are changing, and then we have older relatives whose needs are changing as well. And when your mum or your auntie gets diagnosed with osteoporosis or has a fall and breaks something, that's really difficult, and it makes us reflect on our own health. There's many working women who will be at their most sort of senior point of their career as well, if they're in their 40s, 50s. So it can be a real challenge, and that's before you even sort of think about any hormonal changes. So if you think about that midlife squeeze and then layer on the hormonal changes as well, we've got this elevated external stressors and then a reduced ability to deal with those stressors, and that can be a really challenging a really challenging combination. But one thing we do know from the evidence base is that physical activity and exercise is a very, very effective way to treat anxiety and depression. At least as effective as pharmacological interventions. So. And comes with a whole host of other benefits as well. So it's just another reason to support women to get active, stay active, and enjoy being active.
One thing I've really enjoyed so far is just sort of seeing Anna change those hats a little bit as well, going from like coach to academic to mum to, at this stage, I'm learning loads. I'm really chuffed that, you sat here wearing these different hats, and I would certainly get told off by all the women in my life if I did not ask about HRT.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe firstly what it is, how complex hormones are. Is there any common questions you get about HRT?
Yeah, for sure. We do get asked a lot about HRT, and we're always happy to have that conversation. I'm always very, very quick to recommend that our clients seek professional support from a qualified medic. What I would really love is that I'd love to see every woman have easy access to a GP or other healthcare provider with whom they can have a really good conversation about HRT. I think that can be really difficult. Sometimes it happens and they can access a good GP and have a good conversation. Other times it's difficult. Everybody's different. Everybody's really, really different. So HRT is basically it's pharmacological interventions to support hormonal balance. So the key hormones that we're talking about are estrogen and progesterone. We know that levels decline through perimenopause, and that can lead to the symptoms and the challenges that we see. So HRT can help women achieve a better hormonal balance. And it can be administered in many different ways. It can be in some of them can be tablet form, pump form, patch form, and it's really difficult for women to know which one will work for them. I think there's a lot of trial and error still. And then also you might sort of try a few different things, find a recipe, if you like, that works for you, and then you'll carry on for a little while. Your hormone profile will change again, and then you have to try again. And so it's a bit of a moving target. It can be really difficult for women. I think it's absolutely something that that women need to have a good conversation with a healthcare provider about.
This is a bit of to help with that trial and error. This is purely anecdotal, by the way, but a lot of ladies who I work with, I again listen to a podcast citing evidence that it isn't my own, shall we say. But I remember someone saying, aim to encourage people who are maybe in the late 20s, early 30s to maybe get some sort of blood panel done. Check their hormone levels right now. And then when that time does maybe come around, maybe they've got a point of reference to say, during this time in my life, felt fantastic. Here's where the hormone levels were. And then maybe there's a point of reference there rather than, like you said, just pressing and guessing and seeing what's what. I'm not too sure your thoughts on that.
To be honest, I wouldn't go down that route, because I think where your hormones should be in your 20s is probably very different to where your hormones should be in your 40s, 50s, 60s. Where your hormones are at 2 p.m. on a certain day in your 20s might be different from where they are at 6 p.m. It's such a moving target. It's really, really complex. And unless you're testing daily, which we don't really have a way of doing, then, the trends over the days and weeks, and given that in your 20s you'll still have a menstrual cycle, you would expect massive fluctuations in your hormones throughout the month anyway. So it's a bit of a needle in a haystack doing that, and it could also be really expensive. There are plenty of companies that would happily take your money to do that, but actually in terms of the value it gives you, I'm not convinced unless there's a specific reason. It's much more about feel and how women are feeling, and pressing and guessing is probably our best approach, really, with some really good evidence-based medical support, and then just shifting the parameters a little bit, trying and finding what works for you.
Amazing.
I didn't realise how controversial HRT was until I was speaking to our missus last night about obviously having you on, and she showed me a reel by a doctor who was just livid that so many women were coming to her saying, I want HRT. Davina McCall's online saying it's fantastic. She's had all these results. It's amazing. And I think, again, it's probably just a bit of the fear-mongering thing with these supplements. I think these videos are circulating online of people having amazing experiences, and that's just one person's experience. They might have, just for whatever reason, cracked it with the right dosages at the right time. I imagine someone like Davina McCall has got a great team of doctors and spending quite a lot of money on these things. But there's a lot of horror stories with it as well, of it not going so well. Do you know about any of those? And when it doesn't go quite so right, what's the kind of side effects of that?
Yeah, I think HRT has always been a contentious one, and I think we know about the Women's Health Initiative and some of the really big studies that were done decades ago now that weren't reported accurately, suggested that there were inherent risks with HRT that have since been disproven. So I think there was we sort of went from a place where a lot of women were on it, and then after that research and that poor reporting, there was an awful lot of fear about it. So then the proportion of women taking HRT dropped massively, and then partly because it's become less of a taboo issue, and partly because of influencers like Davina and other people, it's become much more of a topic of conversation again, and people are now seeking that support. So I think the pendulum has swung all over the place with HRT. To be honest, if you look at everybody who's on HRT, you'll have a tiny proportion of people who have an amazing transformative experience, and you'll have a tiny proportion of people who have a terrible experience, and everybody else will be somewhere in the middle. So the fear-mongering, it's HRT is a safe intervention for the vast majority of women, and this is why we always want people to have an individualised, personal conversation about their particular situation, their particular risk factors, the particular symptoms that they're experiencing, and then the healthcare professional can recommend something based on that. That there is no sort of one size fits all prescription, and the people that have the terrible experiences might be coming in with very complex medical backgrounds, and there might be a lot more to it. So it's a conversation that I'm always really keen to encourage women to have with the right person at the right time.
Amazing. Well said. If there's any are there any common myths that your clients bring to you, where maybe it's just a common question that they give and you think, where's that come from?
Yeah, there are. I mean, not particularly related to HRT. I think more broadly, in terms of myths, the idea that you can't lose weight in menopause is an interesting myth. I think you absolutely can. What we know about hormones and body weight is that it tends to change the distribution of weight. So we tend to, when you get into midlife, you tend to acquire more weight around your middle. But in terms of actually gaining weight, it's thought to be much more related to the fact that as we get older, we just get less active, rather than it being sort of particularly hormonally driven, which is actually it's a really good news story that for women, because it's like you're not stuck with this excess weight. You can absolutely do something about it. Let's look at your exercise. Let's look at your nutrition. Let's come up with an achievable plan. So yeah, that's a really common one that we hear. Other myths, people can't exercise because they've got musculoskeletal pain or they've got joint aches and pains. It's incredibly common that women in midlife, and men in midlife as well, have joint pain. It's really, really common, whether that's actual joint pain or whether it's connective tissue pain in terms of frozen shoulder, tennis elbow, Achilles tendinopathy. They're really, really common in midlife. And exercise is absolutely part of supporting people to stay well with joint pain and preventing joint pain in the future as well. I'll do one more if that's all right.
Of course, yeah.
So the other myth is that people can't exercise because they've got pelvic floor issues. Pelvic floor issues are incredibly common in midlife as well. So it's a really common time for people to get first onset of new pelvic floor issues, and it's a really common time for people to experience a sudden worsening of existing pelvic floor issues as well. Things like mild stress incontinence, so just a bit of leaking on coughing, sneezing, jumping, whatever it is really, really common, and you can maybe understand, why that's such a difficult thing to say out loud for women. And it's if you're going to see a 20-year-old male PT in the gym, it's a really, really difficult thing to say.
Is that for women who've had kids and haven't had kids?
Yeah, it's not always linked to childbirth. The more kids you have and the later in life you have them, the greater your risk of having pelvic floor issues in later life. But the key message here is that for the vast majority of people, they are incredibly common and they're highly treatable. So again, it's one of those situations we try and surface this, we try and make it really easy for people to talk about it, and we're very quick to refer people on to specialist physiotherapy support when they present with that as well. But it's absolutely not a stopper in terms of exercise and activity and strength training. It's just another thing to work around.
Amazing. I feel a little bit bad now shifting the conversation to men, seeing as we've spoken quite heavily about women, but I have a specific section of my notes about maybe how partners, sons, and you mentioned coaches there, how we can best support, whether it's as wife, whether it's as mother-in-law, whether it's our mum or as clients we're working with. For any men listening, no pressure with this, Anna, by the way, but what do we typically get wrong around these sort of conversations that we're having right now?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question to ask. And the fact you're asking the question is great, isn't it? Because, there is a will to do better, isn't there? And that's brilliant. So I think don't be afraid to bring it up. Don't expect to get it right first time, but don't be afraid to bring it up. And just, asking questions about... if you have a new client, for example, if they are in their 50s, do you think you're experiencing any perimenopausal changes? That would be a great conversation starter. I
feel really bad opening with that. It'd be like jumping to a conclusion. I'd worry the woman would turn around and say, "What are you trying to say?"
Yeah.
I'd worry that they were going to judge me for jumping to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Oh, she's in her 50s, she must be going through perimenopause or menopause.
Yeah, and I hear you on that, but then it's like, what's the alternative? Say nothing. And
True,
then that's really difficult because that woman, if they're not experiencing anything, can say, well, I'm in the age bracket, but actually I'm fine and I'm doing all right, and that's it. It's not something that, it's a physiological change. So why?
And it's something that's natural. Needs to be talked about. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm probably quite lucky in that all the women, probably over 40 that I coach, all come in on that first session, or that first chat, and they all say, I've been having a few little symptoms. So have you had any experience with this? What do you know? Does it make any changes to the kind of nutrition, training, things like that? So they're quite honest. I'm surprised at how honest people are with stuff like that.
And that shows how comfortable they feel with you, doesn't it? Which is brilliant. That reflects on that, which is fab. So I think absolutely raise the conversation. I feel like we just need to get better at having these conversations. And if you get it wrong, you're unlikely to offend people. They might just give you a few pointers for next time. And you can say something like, I want to raise this, but I don't know how to do it, and I'm worried I'm going to get it wrong. But you are in the perimenopausal age bracket. Are you experiencing any changes? Is there anything I can do to support you with your training on that front? So that would be great. So that would be the first thing, just raising the conversation. I think not assuming that there's a standard menopause experience. So it is that knitting fog thing, it's so different, and it can be so different for the same woman, week to week, and it's vastly different between people as well in terms of the symptoms they experience, the duration of those symptoms, and how that impacts on their life. So I think just recognising that it's a very, very individual experience would be good.
I think I saw a friend of mine actually sent me this stat, and it was divorces massively go up in certain age brackets. Is that I can't help but look and think, well, it does take two to tango. Is this down to...
I've got a theory around that.
Have you?
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's because... And I don't know if it's true or not. You guys can back me up on this. I think when you have kids, your whole life becomes about the family. And I think after the kids have gone and it's just you two in the house, and you realise that, we're not the same people anymore. I actually think I don't know. That's my theory on why divorces happen later in life, because you're finding who you are again in later life, post kids, post being just the dad of or the mum of the house. Personally, with the people I know who've been through divorce in that age bracket, that tends to be the most common thing.
That's a really good way of viewing it. I know it can be super complex.
But for sure, there's so many bits to it. But I think
Yeah.
I think the nuts, from my experience and my own very small survey of people.
I think I just wanted to cover our backs from a male perspective and from a PT perspective, that we are doing everything we can to support the women in our life.
And again, I'm not sure how I'd approach it with my mum though, because I mean my mum's definitely going through it right now for sure, or maybe coming out the back end of it. She's probably mid-60s now, so maybe she. What age does it tend? Is there? Because obviously you said 51 is when it generally starts to set in. Is there a period of time when it lasts, menopause?
Well, it can be highly variable. So that 51 is the average, but that there'll be a lot of variation around that. So it could be 5 years earlier, it could be 5 years later. And then people's experience sort of post-menopause is very variable as well. So some people actually feel that when they're no longer having periods and when their hormonal profile has sort of settled, then they feel an awful lot better and they feel like they're much more on an even keel. For other people, the hormonal changes can carry on for a while. But it's an interesting thing that you mentioned about generational differences. I've talked to my mum about her menopause experience, and she didn't really think she had any problems with it. And
Just
I think
get on with it, don't we?
Well, that's it. It was the put up and shut up generation, wasn't it? They were incredibly stoical, and So
it's funny that I've heard the same thing. Other people have told me that they've spoke to their mums and parents who are of an older age, and they said, I didn't really notice much. I just kind of got on with it.
Just kicked on,
a few little hot flushes here and there, but that was it, kind of thing. And, my mum's mentioned a few things about stuff like that, but again, I think she's of that generation a little bit as well. Of that, you just get on with it, kind of thing. Again, it's just part of life.
Probably a bit of a nerdy question from me as well, but Ryan mentioned hot flushes there. Why does that happen? Is that down to just temperature regulations?
It's about fluctuations in estrogen levels, and we've got estrogen receptors everywhere. It's about sort of vascular compliance, so our ability to regulate our peripheral vasculature changes. So we suddenly dilate and get very hot, and blood goes to the surface, and we look bright red. For some, it's like a classic symptom of menopause, isn't it? But many women will have a symptomatic menopause but won't get hot flashes. So it's an interesting one, and there are a lot of other symptoms associated with perimenopause that might be just as common, but people don't know about. So things like brain fog and palpitations and fatigue and joint pain and all those kind of things. So it's a bit of a hangover from it feels like think menopause, think hot flashes. I think that's how we used to think about it, isn't it? Whereas we know better now. Yeah.
I love talking to academics. I've just written down vascular compliance. I love those two words together. Yeah. Obviously, I feel like we can't have this episode without shouting out Dave Ierson as well, who introduced us. Love Dave. Yeah. Obviously, you think of Dave, you think of PT, you think of training considerations for women in midlife and beyond. What are the key things that you specifically recommend? I know this is a broad question, so if you've got any case studies, feel free to bring them to the table, maybe of adaptations you've had to make or common adaptations, whether that be impact of exercise, whether that be specific movements that are going to benefit. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, so it was great of Dave to connect us, and I every so often I teach on a Menopause for Personal Trainers course that Dave runs at EIS, and we've got one of those coming up, and that's a really nice opportunity to just get our heads together as PTs and think about how the fitness industry can better support women, really. There isn't a set prescription, but I do think it's a time of life when good communication becomes even more important. So thinking about the issues that women in midlife are likely to have, there might be a metabolic health issue in terms of sort of body weight, body fat, a lack of lean muscle mass. that musculoskeletal pain is really common. So, we think carefully. We think really, really carefully about the movements that we prescribe and the loading that we do and the amount of repetitions that we give people, because we're often working around sort of bilateral knee pain or previous injuries that have now become symptomatic again in midlife. So we think about that musculoskeletal aspect carefully. Pelvic floor, we have a conversation with everybody about pelvic floor health, even if they're completely asymptomatic. It's something that we just want to normalise. The nice guidance is that even if you are asymptomatic, women should be doing pelvic floor exercises preventatively daily anyway. So we always want to have that conversation. And there's an interesting sort of conflict for women in midlife, in that we're very focused on bone health and supporting future bone health. We want to do resistance training to support that, and we want to do impact work to support that as well. But actually, if you've got pelvic floor issues, then impact work can be really challenging. So I think we do a lot of really careful programming around these issues to find something that's really challenging, that's still fun, that's still achievable within a very, very busy life, but actually just sort of sneaks around the pelvic floor issues, doesn't aggravate the musculoskeletal issues, and it is paired with a good approach to nutrition as well.
Amazing.
I think that's programming to a T, isn't it, really, for most coaches? Because you're going to get people coming to you, even take away the kind of the pelvic floor stuff, perimenopausal stuff, menopause stuff. You might get someone coming to you and they've got a shoulder issue, they've got a hip issue, they've got an ankle, and all of a sudden your programming has to really kind of tiptoe through this minefield of things that's going to be really good. And there will be a set program that's perfect for them. You've just got to find out what that is. And I think perimenopause and that kind of stuff and going through menopause is no different. You just have to understand what those challenges are that the women are going through.
I completely agree. And that's our job as coaches, isn't it? It's that idea that one size fits pretty much nobody. And we should be having a really good conversation with our client about what they want, what they need. And then it's our job to do that creative programming and come up with something that works for them. And then refining and testing and changing as we go.
That's for me, that's what makes a really good coach. I think someone who's willing to do that. And it's like an industry. It's full of good people and people who aren't so great. And you only know about the people who aren't so great because other clients come to you, unfortunately, with those stories. And they say, this person just had this program and they weren't willing to change. And it's hard to hear that sometimes, that some people don't care as much as you do as well. Do you think that's probably what led you maybe into more of the kind of coaching role yourself and setting up your own thing to kind of really support women more?
I think so, yeah. And I think it's like, for me as a coach with my coaching hat on, that's the fun bit. It's like the problem solving and the creative programming is the fun bit. I'd be bored out of my brains if I was just putting everybody on the same program. So that's the bit that really floats my boat. I love doing that. And I suppose with a bit of a healthcare background, I always feel I just maybe feel slightly more comfortable with the complex clients as well who've got health things going on. So I really, really enjoy that challenge of complex programming. And I suppose what motivates me is I still feel that women are underserved in the fitness industry. I think, great progress has been made, but I think we've got a long way to go. And I feel like we just need to change our view of what good coaching looks like for women, really. And just, good coaching is always based on understanding somebody's life and their goals. And that's really, really important in midlife, that we listen to women, we understand what their lives are like, and we come up with something that will work.
Yeah. I think for me, it's knowing that there are courses out there. There's educational resources, there's people like yourself who spearhead it, and just being aware that if you are a coach or you are someone who wants to invest in a coach to support with your goals, your ambitions, and maybe support you into midlife. I mean, you mentioned midlife coaching there. Like, am I right in thinking your model works on almost like a cohort basis where you do get people in? Talking about that. Yeah, absolutely. So my coaching business is called Midlife Fitness Coaching.
I run the business, and we have 3 coaches and myself. We take cohorts of women. So we take a group in January, April and September, and we support them for an 8-week programme. And then after that, if they're confident and happy to go it alone, they do so, or they can stay with us on what we call our graduate programme afterwards, which is a sort of reduced support programme. We started it for the reasons I've explained, because I just felt like there was a gap for something that was evidence-based, but also sort of interesting and challenging. We had real questions, because it's 100% online. It's important to make that really clear to people. It's 100% online coaching. And I had genuine questions about whether online coaching, particularly to get people into strength training, will that work? Can it be effective? Might it be dangerous? So, I had all these questions. So we just gave it a go and came up with this 8-week coaching package, and we've had over 50 women through it now, and it really works. It's I guess it's not better than PT. It's just very different than PT. And I think one thing, because it's all delivered through an app, it just allows us to absolutely insert ourselves into people's lives in a way that when you only get them for an hour a week, it's really hard to do. So we really try and support long-term behaviour change. So everybody completes quite a big questionnaire. Everybody gets a 45-minute consultation with me and their primary coach, and then we come up with a bespoke programme for them, which is based on the exercise fundamentals and the nutrition fundamentals, and then we just coach them through it for 8 weeks. And I think that sense of accountability is very high. I think because the app will integrate with wearables, so we can pull in all sorts of data, and several clients have said, in the nicest possible way, it feels like there's nowhere to hide. So we see how many steps they're doing, we see what they're eating, we see when they do their workouts, we see what their heart rate's doing, and if they skip a workout, we'll be very quick to just check in and make sure they're all right. So it's a very, very supportive framework, and it's brilliant. It's just lovely to have that opportunity to support women, and we've had some amazing, really amazing success stories.
I love seeing people come to life when they talk about the work they do. Am I right in thinking a lot of the data that you do gather, is that going towards any academic side of things as well? Is that going hand in hand with the 2 hats that you wear? Yeah.
So I'm always interested in the evidence. So we set out on a mission to only sort of deliver evidence-based interventions. So no fads. It goes back to the sort of supplements and the Meno-washing. There's none of that rubbish. So it's absolutely evidence-based. And then we were really lucky.
No nootropics in there.
Not yet. Yeah. We were really lucky. We were able to get some funding from South Yorkshire Innovation Programme to do a research study in partnership with Sheffield Hallam University. So for our April cohort, who start in just under 2 weeks now, they start on Monday the 27th of April, they had the opportunity to opt into a research study, which entails them going along to the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre and undergoing a load of sort of physical body composition and physical tests. So just things like balance measures, grip strength, sit to stand. They go in the bod pod to look at lean muscle mass and fat mass, and there's a whole battery of assessments that they will do before the programme. Then they'll have the 8 weeks of coaching, and then they'll go back and be remeasured at the end.
That's a brilliant part of the programme. I really like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an add-on for this April cohort only, and it's just trying to enable us to sort of quantify the changes that might happen through. Yeah, exactly, and then we can use that data to advertise our programmes to more women.
Brilliant.
And obviously we'll certainly link some more resources to that one in the show notes. I'll make sure to do that. A quick question about, I suppose, maybe women who are looking for the PT side of things as well. So if they are looking for a coach, I know you work quite closely with Envisage. If there's a woman listening who maybe thinks, do you know what, for the first couple of sessions, or I might just need a bit of hand-holding, you know, what sort of advice have you got for maybe women who are looking to start, have never stepped foot in a gym before, and are really, really apprehensive?
Oh yeah, and I think so. When you say that, my first thought is that that's a massive group of people. It's a huge group of people. I think I'm not going to be able to remember the actual figures, but I think it's fewer than 10% of women do regular strength training. So you've got 90 odd percent of UK women who don't regularly strength train. So that is a massive population of women, and this is the population that we need to do better with. So I would say to those women, try and have a conversation with the PT beforehand. If you don't feel comfortable with them, it's probably not going to work. I would always want to know that PT is listening and doing some good assessment. It is that like one size doesn't fit anyone. So if they're going into a sort of bog standard program, then that would be a bit of an unstarter for me. So I hear things about women going into gyms and then being told to do like 20 jumping jacks to warm up, and it's like, well, I've got a really bad ankle and my pelvic floor shot, and and that'll be it. They won't go back. That's it. They had a horrible experience and they won't go back. So I guess it's just that getting a rapport with a PT that you're comfortable with, and then making sure that there is some sort of assessment process where the woman can explain to the PT what matters to them.
There's a phrase that I use semi-regularly with some of the PTs I work with, which is you got to kiss a few frogs. You literally but if you are really apprehensive and nervous, go in and try maybe PTs or trying different gyms.
Yeah.
That's a big step. It's like someone saying to me, like, well, I can't dance. It's like, well, if you want to go and do some salsa classes, you've got to go to loads of different salsa classes. I'm like, that sounds terrifying.
Absolutely. You've got to spend your time and your money driving around, going to all these inconvenient things to try and initiate something that you're really, really nervous about doing. Yeah. You're not going to do it, are you? I suppose the other thing that I feel quite strongly about is that I don't feel like women in midlife have to have a female coach. I feel like there's loads of brilliant male coaches out there. Whether the coach is male or female, I just want them to be able to have an open conversation about some of the challenges associated with midlife.
We didn't pay her to say that, by the way.
Yeah. No, we did not. Have you got any final questions for Dr. Anna?
Well, I guess before we started talking on the podcast, we were chatting about your endeavours with exercise and training. What do you do to keep fit? What's your kind of stuff that you enjoy training wise?
Yeah, sure. So I was quite late to the whole strength training thing. I didn't do that through my sort of teens and 20s. My big thing is cycling. I absolutely love being on the bike, whether that's mountain bike, gravel or road. Doing quite a lot on the road at the moment because as part of my midlife crisis, I've signed up for a big event in summer. So
what's that?
It's a charity event for the charity Cure Leukemia. So my brother had blood cancer a few years ago, and so it's a charity that's very close to my heart. And so in the summer, I'm going to be cycling all 9 stages of the Women's Tour de France. Doing it one day ahead of the professional riders. It's ridiculous mileage and ridiculous climbing.
Talk through it. I want to know.
That does sound epic.
I need to know numbers as a person who's new to cycling.
So I think I think most of the days, so it's 9 days, I think most of them are at least 150k, but some of them are longer.
Oh my goodness.
There's like 2,000 meters of climbing easily most days. There's one short day, but it's pretty brutal.
150 kilometers a day. That is insane.
So and I genuinely don't know if I'll be able to do it, but I'm trying my best, and I absolutely love. I'm always better with a goal and something to aim for and a bit of structure. So really, really enjoying the training. And Cure Leukemia are brilliant. They're a brilliant charity. They really look after you and support you through the training as well. There's 23 women that are doing it, so I've got to know the others, and there's a lot of camaraderie, and it's honestly it feels like an absolute privilege to be doing that. It's great. Yeah.
So when did you start strength training? What age?
So I started strength training probably in a very sort of hit and miss way in my 30s, and then it was only in my 40s that I was like, actually, this really matters. I really understand now. So it sort of came into sharp focus for me then. So I have a gym membership, tend to go to the gym once a week, do 2 workouts at home, just sort of short, 30 minutes.
What will those workouts look like? Talk us through the gym one. What were you doing in the gym? What exercises?
So in the gym, it depends where in the week it falls, because I don't like to stuff my legs up if I've got a long ride the next day.
Course.
So I do... I'll warm up, I'll do a bit of core stuff. So I do sort of 2 or 3 core exercises. And then I tend to work through sort of 3 supersets, and then a bit of stretching and mobility. Cool. The stretching mobility, again, I was really rubbish at that for ages, and I just feel like now I'm doing all these miles on the bike, I absolutely cannot get away without it. So that's really locked in now.
Non-negotiable now.
Yeah, for sure. I don't lift super heavy. When I sort of properly got into lifting initially, I was really excited and I progressed and I was really into, how much I could deadlift and stuff. I had quite a bit of time off last year, had some surgery, so I don't lift heavy, but I do enough to challenge my muscles. I try and get to, pretty close to failure. So that might look like doing more reps and an extra set rather than sort of
an extra 5-10 kilos on the bar.
Exactly. So there's ways and means, aren't there? There's many different ways to sort of construct a workout. So 2 short workouts at home and 1 decent one in the gym, and that's me. Cool. And it's all at the moment, it's all to sort of support and help manage the stress of cycling really on your body. It puts a lot of stress on it, doesn't it? So
obviously cycling sounds like the main thing right now. Have you been into other stuff in the past? Have you been into like running, anything
Not really,
else? No, okay.
I did just cycling mad. So I have done I've run in the past, and I've done a few triathlons and I've done a few half marathons, but it's all quite a long time ago now. I got to the point where I was sort of picking up injuries and finding it just took me longer to get over those injuries. And that's when I really sort of threw myself into the cycling. Cycling is a big part of my social life as well. I've got some great friends that cycle. So that's, maybe instead of going to the pub, we'll go out for a mountain bike ride. And so it has become very much about the bike, but I'm really, really aware that, I have to do stuff to balance that across the week. Otherwise I will be heading for other injuries. So the mobility work and the strength and the stretching and everything really supports that as well.
It's interesting you mentioned about the social stuff, because we've obviously seen studies on like the Gen Zers now, the young people in there kind of 18 to 28, something like that. That kind of age range. They're now socialising more in gyms than they are in pubs.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
It is, yeah. And I think it's really indicative of your kind of like exercise week as to where your social circle lies as well. And I think if someone was wanting to get into cycling or something like that, it's so important that you have friends or you join groups, or the running communities now are fantastic, aren't they? Like the amount of running groups there are around. Cycling groups, I don't tend to hear about as many of those, but maybe it's just because I'm kind of new to it all. Which cycling group are you part of?
So I'm part of a club, it's called Seven Hills. They have a good range of rides every week. It's I'd say it's probably for sort of more committed cyclists, probably not, if you're new to it, it probably wouldn't be the right club to go along to. But I know that there's lots of really good initiatives, and cycling, like everything else, it tends to be quite male dominated still. So it can be really intimidating, and because there's a bit more kit to get to grips with as well, that fear of looking stupid never goes away, does it? And
there's more barriers to entry.
Yeah, for sure. So the Breeze Network, I don't know, that's a British cycling initiative, and that's very much about getting women into cycling in the first place, getting their confidence, getting their bike skills. So I think that's a really good place to start. And then I think some of the bike shops do women's rides as well. But we've had a good success story with Seven Hills, because historically I think there were about, if we go back 5 years, I think there were maybe 2 female members in a membership of about 80, and I think now they have about 30 women.
Wow.
So it's changing. It's changing for the better, but we've still got work to do.
I think that's across everything now. I feel like you see it in like on TV, right? Women's football now is really booming.
It's fabulous.
It's across everything. I think sport shouldn't be so male dominated. And it's really important that we welcome everyone into every sport for sure.
A key word I wrote down probably just as we started speaking was culture. And I think you doing what you're doing with not only the research but the coaching that you're doing, just trying to make a dent in that culture. And I had a bit of a dream at the start of this episode where I thought I'd love for this to be one of the episodes where people get a hold of and say, right, I need to send this to whoever. Like, you need to listen to this because it's going to be helpful for, you know, for mum, for his auntie, for whatever. Like, that's always been my dream for this episode to get it out there.
And I think you can be that change amongst your family. It starts by you sending them the episode, but then they listen to this episode and they go, well, Anna's part of this really nice community of cyclists. I haven't got anything like that. Maybe you create that kind of group by yourself. That person you send it to, let's go and meet up with them once a week for a walk. Yeah. That walk turns into a run. Oh, you know what? I quite like the idea of the biking. Let's go and hire some bikes and go down Monsell Trail or something like that. And all of a sudden you're getting this little bit of a buzz around it. And that's how it starts. But you've got to show that initiative. And a lot of the times this kind of stuff is on other people's minds. People just aren't talking about it enough. That's kind of the big thing I find with a lot of people I coach. And once they've started speaking to Sandra at work about this, it's amazing how a lot of these thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotions have all been there. No one's talking about them. So, send this to people if you know that someone might benefit from it. Absolutely.
Is there any other bits that you'd like to raise today, Anna, before we close?
No, I don't think so. No, I feel like we've had a great chat. Yeah.
No, honestly, really appreciate just the level of detail you got into. And if people do want to, again, check out the amazing work that you're doing, where can they find you?
So we've got a website, which is just midlifefitnesscoaching.com. We're on Insta at Midlife Fitness Coaching, and on Facebook as well at the same. So,
Absolutely amazing.
Give her a shout.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you as always for joining us on the Fit Lads podcast. We'll see you next one.
See you soon.
Anna, thank you so much.
That was
awesome.
That was
really good.
Amazing.
Thank you.